should be ready.
I'd like to call to order the June 2021 regular meeting of the Kentucky State Board of Elections. This meeting is being conducted on Zoom. We will discuss a little further later in the meeting a return to a regular order, so to speak, with everybody coming back into the regular meeting room. More on that later. In the meantime, I'll call the roll to make sure, or have everybody introduce themselves to make sure that we've got a quorum. And I will call you as I see you on my screen, call the members. James Lewis.
James Lewis, retired county clerk, Leicester County.
Sherry Whitehouse.
Good morning, Sherry Whitehouse, member Ballot County.
Jerry Johnson.
Good morning, Jerry Johnson, member from Franklin County.
Deanna Brangers.
Good morning, Deanna Brangers, member Jefferson County.
Corey Skolnick.
Morning, everyone. Member County.
Lynn Lane.
Good morning, Lynn Lane, retired Ballard County clerk.
All right, we've got all seven out of the 8 voting members. I'm Ben Chandler. I'm the chair, and the one that we're missing is Dwight Sears, and Dwight has called in to let us know that he is unavoidably detained, which is an unusual thing for Dwight because he attends these things quite regularly, and he wants everybody to know that he looks forward to seeing him at the next meeting. The same thing is true of the representative and president of the Kentucky County Clerks Association, who is usually with us. That would be Chris Cockrell from Montgomery County, Kentucky, and he also can't be with us, but hopes that you all can enjoy, and all of us can join them in the next few days at their conference. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed Secretary of State, Michael Adams, who is also a member of the board, a non-voting member of the board. And we have our staff with us, Jared Deering, who is our executive director. We've got our assistant executive director, Karen Sellers. Sheila Walker, a valued staff member, is with us. So is Taylor, and I believe, and Rachel Pointer. I don't want to miss Rachel. We count on her to keep us from making any mistakes. In any event, welcome everybody. And with that, I will 18th 2021 minutes. I'm sure you guys do not want me to read them in their entirety, so I will accept a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Unless anybody has any changes. That's motion.
Second.
I believe it was that member Lane.
Ben, you're kind of breaking up on us, I think.
Yeah, Chairman, you're freezing up.
All right. Well, are you all hearing me?
And your Chairman Chandler, you're freezing up a little bit.
Well, I don't know what to do about that.
I think maybe we just continue to move forward, and hopefully it's just a blip in your Wi-Fi. I have been told from the legislature they should be laying new fiber lines, but I've also been told that they were not going directly to your house, so that might be a problem in the future.
Well, I could get out to the road if they'll get them near my house, but it is a problem, and apparently you all can hear me now. So I heard Member Brangers make a motion to approve the minutes. And I heard a second from Member Whitehouse. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very good. The minutes are approved. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Pointer and let her talk and while my internet tries to repair itself.
Good morning, everybody. There isn't a lot to report in May. It's been a calm month. I'd say if you talk to me this time next week, it will be a completely different story as we close out fiscal year 21, which has been crazy. Page 6 is our general operating expenses. The only charge there that is a little abnormal is our COT data storage cost. We had previously move those over to our coronavirus relief funds, but they will start hitting the agency from this point on. They also hit in April, and the IT staff is coming up with some solutions to maybe get those costs down in the future, but that is a work in progress at this time. The next couple of pages are going to be for your HAVA Title I and your security grants. Not many charges there. Our IT contractor charges and our VRS help desk email are the only things that hit this month.
Rachel, can I interrupt you real briefly, Chairman, if that's okay with you? So I wanted to take a moment while you were talking about those HAVA charges. The Secretary of State had a really great idea, and I just wanted to bring it up and give the board a little notice of what we might be working on over the next month or so, which is we do have HAVA Title $2, unless I'm wrong about that, we're in an interest accruement account that unfortunately we can't draw down on until those all of the Title $2 have been expended out. And because of an MOU we had with those counties, we still have outstanding funds associated with that. The Secretary brought to our attention that there might be an ability to maybe work with those counties to draw those funds down and potentially use some of that those interest-bearing accounts that have money in them for other items, including the purchase of election equipment for the county. So we want to both thank the Secretary for his recommendation, but also inform the board that we'll be looking into that to see if that's appropriate for us to be able to do and how we can do that in an expedited way if that is appropriate. So we'll have Rachel Pointer and Karen and Taylor will be working on that with finance and EAC to make sure that we're doing that appropriately. But I just wanted to keep the board informed on what that looks like. And again, thank the Secretary.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Rachel, you got more, or are you done?
I'm mostly done, actually. We have a couple of CARES Act. We had a couple of checks that have been returned from counties. We're still waiting on one final check to come back for a return of unused CARES funding. And at that point, then I think we will look into the process of closing that out, finishing out our state match portion and try to conclude that. For CRF, we had minimal expenses on that. We do have a few more expenses that we're hoping to hit. You'll see those in June. It's kind of go time at the end of June where everything happens. So the 21st is the day to really start with that. Other than that, the interest accounts are essentially the same. And that's really all I've got for this month. Jared, do you have anything?
Anybody have any
questions?
Questions from the members? Any? All right, hearing none, thank you very much, Ms. Pointer, and we will move on to the next item, which has to do with an emergency administrative regulation. I know that Taylor Brown has been working diligently on this. I know also Secretary Adams and Member Skolnick have also been involved in this, but I'll turn it over to Jared to explain it and call on whoever you want, Jared.
Thank you, Chairman. So as the board is aware, House Bill 574, when it passed, came with a new requirement for regulations to be set by the State Board of Elections on how an election would be conducted under those new laws. While we initially had thought that there might be some more time to get some of those regulations worked out, maybe work with a larger group of clerks, with other stakeholders. The unfortunate thing is, as those will come into Bear on, I believe it's now July 28th, Mr. Secretary. Is that the day I think it was moved back from 29th to 28th?
June 29th.
Perfect. Okay. So as that comes into play, even though our next election, regularly scheduled election, it won't be until next year, there is still the potential for a county to have a special election for a wet dry in a precinct, for a local option, or even a special election to be called if necessary. And the clerks would need to govern that election under the new rules in House 574. That being said, we have implemented emergency regulations. We have vetted these through both the legal subcommittee, and Chairman Chandler forgot to mention himself that he's also reviewed these. Member Skolnick, Secretary Adams. We've also worked with several clerks as well. My hope is that if amenable to the board, we can pass these e-regs out today, have something in place. They'll be submitted to LRC. We've also submitted these to the governor's staff for review as well, because the governor has to sign them as they are emergency regulations. And the hope here is that as emergency regulations are passed, we now have a baseline for the clerks to adhere to in case of a special election or wet dry precinct election. And then we can start to broaden the stakeholder groups that we work with for the permanent regulations that we'll ultimately bring back to the board. My guess is they won't vary too much, but we definitely want to get more eyes on them and have more clerk input, as they will ultimately be the ones implementing these. We want to make sure it both works for their office, but is also transparent, and that the process is available to the public to evaluate as well. So that being said, Taylor Brown, our general counsel, will go over a brief explanation of the regs. And these will be posted both on the LRC website as well as our website for the public to be able to review. And any clerk that wants to see them as well, obviously will be there. But Taylor, if you want to go ahead and give us a brief explanation, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Jared. Good morning, everyone. The regs that we're talking about are in the board book. There's 3 of them with 3 separate numbers. The working by number, the first one is 195E, and that's the consolidation of precincts and precinct election officers. And part of 574 said you need a form that the counties are going to fill out and turn into the board if they want to consolidate the precincts and consolidate the officers. So that one just establishes the form. It's a pretty standard form, no frills really about it. And that's all that's in that one. The second one is 200E, and that's another form. It's the chain of custody form for records related to an election contest, if there is one, in any race for the governor, lieutenant governor slate, or a member of the General Assembly. And again, pretty standard form. Nothing really to that one either. And that's all that one does. The most comprehensive of the 3 is 5025E. And that one's titled Ballot Standards and Security. And this one covers a wider range of issues. It does have forms, the voter affirmation forms that are related to proof of identification, the precinct election, the officer affirmation form, the oath of voter form, those kind of things. So this one gets into some of that, ballot drop boxes, the absentee request portal, those kind of issues, tackle the security side of it. And then again, ballot standards is also a security measure as well, I guess. But it tells the counties that in whatever conditions are already outlined in statutes 117, 145, that any paper ballots that are printed are going to need to meet certain standards. There's a standard for the accessible website. We had an accessible absentee request website for the pandemic election, the 2020 election. This puts actual standards on what that should look like in the future. And yeah, just a bunch of stuff we did last year is included here, just formalizing that from 574 to the reg to bring those things into life. And again, a couple forms. We've got the oath of voter. The one I forgot to mention is the missing or discrepant mail-in absentee signature. It's going to be the SBE 77. We had the exact same form last year. This is for signature cures on absentee ballots. And another big one is for security is the ballot accountability statement, which is going to track the movement of the ballots from the time they're printed until the conclusion of the election. So this one is kind of comprehensive, but it all boils down to really ballot security, ballot standards. So everyone, like I said, these are in your board book, but I'm happy to take any questions about them if anyone has any questions before we go further.
Thank you, Taylor. Member Skolnick or Secretary Adams or both, would you all like to comment on this at all?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than thank Taylor and everybody else for their hard work on them. I think they're well done.
Yes, indeed, Taylor. Thank you so much. I know you put a lot of effort into it. Mr. Secretary.
I'll just second Corey's statement. This was a great team effort over a period of several days, all of our offices working together. This stuff is really very technical. There's not really any policy making reflected here. This is just effectuation of the directives of House Bill 574. We're just filling in the little blanks with the appropriate forms, but it's all in good order.
Very good. Does anybody else, any other member have any question about the regs? Member Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Taylor, you had sent an updated set of regs and forms late yesterday. And on your email, you referenced that Section 8 makes it a little clearer that a voter affirmation is only one thing a voter without proof of identification needs. Can you clarify for me what else is included? I mean, if they have no voter ID and they fill out the form and attest to their right to vote, what else is needed?
So I will pull that exactly up for you so I'm not leaving anything out. It's in the statute. It's 117, I believe 225, 228. 2 seconds.
225 is what it looks like.
Well, there's a couple of them, but this one is 228 2. So you'll have to, the voter will have to fill out the form, and then they'll also be required to either produce a social security card, a identification card that's issued by a county that the board has approved, or any other identification card that has their photo and their name on it. Or they can use food stamp, electronic benefit transfer card, or supplemental nutrition assistance card, as long as it's issued by the state and has the name of the voter on it. In addition to the old, also mentioned at the end there, the old credit card or debit card with their name on it. So it's 117, 228, paren 2A through E.
Thank you.
And I just changed the wording there to make it clear that just by filling out the form, you're not done. You still have to have one of those items.
Gotcha.
Do any other members have any questions?
Chairman Chandler,
Yes. Member Lewis.
on 195E, where it deals with consolidation of precinct officers at a central location. I'm assuming, if I'm reading this right, and the law, the precinct officers would be serving for multiple precincts, officers for multiple precincts. Is that correct, Taylor?
It is, if that's what they're
Okay.
wishing to do.
How do we avoid then the constitutional conflict in section 148 that states that every precinct officer shall be a voter and resident of the precinct in which they act?
Well, I think they still would need, I'm sorry, I don't know if I was breaking up there. I think you would still need to be in that one, whatever precinct is consolidated into the larger sphere, you would need to be in that precinct. If that
There's
makes sense.
still, if I might, Member Lewis, the part of that process, the consolidation, is not doing away with the precinct. The precinct still exists. The poll worker still works within a precinct. However, those precincts have been consolidated into one voting location, meaning the benefits for the voter are that they don't have to wait in multiple lines or to figure out which table they have to go to. The poll worker is still representing a precinct, but has the ability to cross-check in voters from other precincts by utilizing the e-poll book, by ensuring they get the correct ballot face. And a lot of that was codified in 574.
That still seems to violate section 148 of the Constitution, because they're acting as an official in a precinct that they're not, by the Constitution, allowed to serve in.
Mr. Secretary,
Well,
let's
yeah.
take this on. So let's hear about it.
So, Member Lewis, because of this concern that you raised in a prior meeting, we actually went into 574 and added some language for purposes of service as an election officer. Precincts are consolidated. So that means that essentially a new precinct is created. And so a worker from one precinct within that voting location can check in a voter from a different precinct within that consolidated location. That's in 574. The Constitution does require precincts, and it also does require that a voter, that an election officer and a voter be of the same precinct, but it doesn't say what the precincts have to be. So by changing the statutorily, which we have the authority, the legislature has the authority to do, that's how we were able to lead that problem.
Are you creating new precincts by a process other than the statutory process that's been in place for years? County boards going to the state board, LRC, and when they abolish or combine precincts or create precincts, it seems to me that you're trying to create a new precinct just for election day without losing the autonomy of the precinct in itself.
Well, essentially, yeah, that's the idea. The judgment of the legislature on a nearly unanimous basis was it was time to update our 130-year-old election code. So for the most part, that process has remained intact, but at a voluntary basis, if counties choose to do this at the local level, then they can consolidate some of their precinct voting locations in a way that complies with the Constitution. And again, it's optional. So Leslie County doesn't have to, Harlan County doesn't have to, but we do expect that other counties will want to take advantage of this because it will save them a significant amount of money. As I think I said last time, Boyle County thinks they're going to save about $200,000. Critton County is going to save $60,000. That's a very small county with hardly any voters or precincts. So again, it's voluntary, but we did have a statutory workaround to make sure that we complied with the Constitution.
And Member Lewis, I think that the legislature, the Secretary of State, and I think a number of county clerks and a lot of other folks who've been involved think that this passes constitutional muster. And what we're trying to do as a board is to execute the law that and the language of the statute that the legislature passed. It would be my expectation that if anybody had any question about the constitutionality, they would have the option to take that up with a court somewhere here in Kentucky and challenge it. I mean, I think that's where we are at this point.
I agree with you. I understand all that, and I'm well aware of that. I just hope that counties wouldn't be in a position where it does become declared unconstitutional near an election, and they are not prepared to provide precincts for all the voters that they would have to if the courts did indeed say that this is an unconstitutional act. I just think it deserves attention to make sure that clerks and county boards are not in position on election day or near election day to try to scramble to go back to a system that was in place previously that was constitutional.
Jared, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, to Member Lewis's point, and, I think, I really appreciate your opinion, Member Lewis. I think that's part of the reason why you're on the board and respected as much as you are by both the Clerk Association as well as the board. I think that one of the things I wanted to highlight is that we will continue to work with the KCCA. Just at the last meeting, we discussed this with the clerks at length about kind of what some of the expectations would be. And I think it's important for the public to also understand that this is not about removing precinct locations. I think it's allowing, one of the things that I expressed to the Clerk Association, that as the board reviews these documents for approval, all counties have to submit an election plan to the State Board of Elections for approval prior to implementing that election plan. So if they plan to consolidate locations, that is one thing that has to come to the board. And one of the criteria I expressed to the clerks is that, when the board reviews these, two of the items we'll be looking for is A, does this make it easier for voters to cast their ballot in an effective manner? And two, does it create efficiencies for the county that will save taxpayer dollars and create what I would say is a logistical ease of a more efficient election? But if the answer to that is only number two and not number one, then that's a plan that might not be approved by the board. And so I think it's important for the clerk to understand that while there's efficiencies that can be added through the new House Bill 574, that a lot of it was done in the purpose of ensuring that ballot access to the voters still remains present, and that clerks have a way to effectuate that under the Constitution, under the statutes that govern our elections. And I think it's important to understand that, not to single out a specific county, but I was speaking to the Fulton County clerk recently, and they currently, under normal election cycle, have four locations for their precincts. I think there are 9 or 10 precincts in total. That might be a little bit off, but in general, they have about 10 to 12 precincts, and they have 4 voting locations. And in the past, each one of those voting locations had 2 or 3 precincts that were located in it. And so when a voter showed up, they had to identify both where they were going to vote and then identify which table was theirs. And if it was a primary election, you could have 2 tables in every single precinct. So now with the efficiency that they can add to this is those voting locations stay exactly the same. So for the voters' perspective, they their location that they've always voted at is not going to change. However, they now actually have more options because they can now be able to go to, and again, this is if the county board decides that this is how they will determine it and the state board approves it. But in hypothetical terms, that county would now have 4 locations where any voter can go to that location, identify their correct precinct, and be able to cast their ballot effectively with waiting in line less, with a more efficient line. So even the lines that are there will be faster and be able to queue through in a more efficient manner. And it'll also save the county a lot of money, both in the amount of poll workers they'll have to recruit, the amount of equipment they'll have to purchase for each location. But for the voter, they, instead of seeing a drastic difference in how they vote, that voter might not have any change at all, other than their lines a little bit quicker. Or they might be able to also go vote in another location that is still precinct based, but located somewhere around the county that might be a more convenient drive. So maybe that they work in that location or go to school at that location, whatever that scenario looks like. But we'll continue to work with the KCCA and the county clerks closely to make sure that these plans are approved or effective for the voter. And to your point, that they're also prepared for the unknown. I think that's what elections administrators do best, is prepare and have backup plans to make sure that they can have a successful election no matter what comes up.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for that question, Member Lewis. Anything else you want to discuss relative to that?
No, sir.
I can tell you this from personal experience, it's never a good idea to predict what a court will do. So you've got a good point in bringing this up. It's a matter of real concern. I do think that efforts by the legislature have been focused on trying to do something that will help the clerks, help the counties, and help the voters. And we think that this is an effort to do that. We agree that it is, and hopefully it will be, if challenged, rule constitutional. But who knows what a court will do. In any event, if a court does rule it unconstitutional, as Jared said, we're going to be prepared to try to make sure that all the clerks are ready. And I know that's your main concern, and we appreciate it very much. Anybody else have any questions about the regs or any comments? Hearing none, I will accept a motion to approve the regs. Anybody?
Motion.
Motion by Member Skolnick. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Member Lane. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Thank you all. The regs have passed. Now we'll, next thing on our agenda is the county clerk's report, and member County Clerk Cockrell is not here, so we will pass over that and move to Secretary Adams. Mr. Secretary, you're up.
Good morning. I don't have a whole lot to share substantively, so I'll be really short. I just want to note that as the state has been reopening the past month or 6 weeks or so, I've been back out on the trail. The advice I got from one of my predecessors was try to be out on the road 1 day a week during the session, and I'm 4 days a week at a session. So I'm not quite there yet, but I've had actually more events in the state in the last 6 weeks than I did the first 16 months. I've been all over Harlan, Western Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, Southern Kentucky. Folks are really pleased with the work of the board and the work of the legislature in making this law and these changes permanent. I am getting a lot of questions about the voting machines, specifically about the transition period for those, when folks can expect that. Certainly the local officials are interested. So I do expect that the board will start getting requests, assistance with funding and so forth as we get deeper into the year, and especially as the new fiscal year is about to start for these counties. And so that's, I know, something we've talked about previously. It's a good problem to have, but I do expect that we're going to have counties lining up to draw down federal dollars and begin upgrading their machines.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I'm glad to hear your report that that folks out in the state are happy with how everything has gone. As we know, the last I don't know, 16 months or so have been maybe the most eventful in Kentucky electoral history. We've had an unbelievable amount of change. We had an election like none other, and it was incredibly successful and was said to be by almost all commentators. And then we had a change in the law in the last legislative session. Both of those things you have been instrumental in, Mr. Secretary, and that law change really has been as dramatic as any change that certainly in my lifetime, and maybe for a whole lot longer than that. But in any event, it's been quite a time, and I'm glad to hear that the report is good for everybody. Well done. Well done to everybody who's been involved. Mr. Executive Director, do you have anything to add at this point? You're on mute.
My apologies. I have a couple of brief comments. If I might, there was a request by the board to determine how we would have in-person meetings moving forward and what that looks like and what our meetings will begin to look like. So I've reviewed with staff the ability to have what we might call a hybrid meeting for the time being. I think it would be important to transition the board back into what might eventually become a more normal process of in-person, similar to what we used to have. But in the interim, I think what would be important, if it's appropriate for the board, and maybe if you would like to take a vote on this as well, that might solidify it, which is to request that the staff create what I would call a hybrid meeting in which Zoom is still utilized, both for members that might not be able to travel all the way to the board conference room. That board members who would like to also be in person in the board conference room could do so, and that staff would find a mechanism in which to be able to utilize Zoom for the members who are remote, but also have a camera on the members who are live in person so that members can have that interaction with each other, and that we could also cast that publicly. I think it's been an important part of the process over the last year, especially with such a vast change in our election process, that the public has had an ability to be able to view and watch these and see what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it's been a very transparent process. So I think moving forward, if we can continue to have both of those abilities of being able to have a public viewing point, but also have the board be able to interact in person, I think is important. And also continue to have that ability for some board members to remote in if it's appropriate.
Thank you, Jared. Jared is going to try to get us back in the office, but as I understand it, first we need the staff to create a system that will do that and cover our needs, which include making sure that the public can hear everything that we're doing and making sure that we can interact with each other. Do I have a motion to instruct the staff to construct that sort of system?
Motion.
Motion by member Whitehouse and a second by member Johnson. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Very good. Thank you. Mr. Deering, you
Couple
have
more items. Sorry to keep going, but so a few things. I just want to let the board know that I'll be traveling tomorrow to the western part of the state. I'm going to be visiting a couple of county clerks, working with them on their plans. They wanted to review them. I think there are multiple counties that are interested in presenting their plans to the board fairly soon. Obviously, we're quite some time away from an election, but part of the benefits to the secretary's point earlier is there's a lot of cost savings that can be adopted for the county in determining how much election equipment they actually need to purchase. And so having some solidity in how that plan will be approved and knowing that they can move forward with that is going to be important for the county. So we're going to work with them. Obviously, plans that we work on will come to the full board for approval. And we'll give you some metrics and some data to be able to baseline those and make decisions from appropriately. But we'll start working with clerks probably in the next week or two on that process and what it looks like. Taylor is creating some forms for the clerks to be able to utilize for that process and be able to submit adequate information. My feeling is, at least in the immediate, is that a lot of those forms and documents will look a lot like what we requested from the counties during the pandemic elections, which is providing us enough information to make a good faith basis judgment on whether or not those plans are effective for the voters at the county level. Obviously, we don't know the counties as well as the own county clerk and the county board of elections, but we do have a responsibility to ensure that voters have access and that elections can be run effectively. So we'll try to present as much information as possible on that. If the board might, the last page of your board book, there is a new logo So I'd like to thank the team at Red 7E, who is our state contract for advertisement. We've been working with them on multiple materials throughout the last year. As you remember, they came up with some really great commercials for us to run during the pandemic election, notifying voters of the changes that we made. They've also made a great voter ID commercial that kind of informs voters on what that process looks like moving forward. One of the things we also asked them to do is modernize our logo. And so after seeing a number of them, and they made some really excellent submissions, but this logo, from my perspective and staff's perspective, is something we think might work. But before we finalize that, we wanted to bring it to the board's attention to see if anyone had any concerns with it, and or if it was okay with the board. And if it is, I'd ask for a vote to approve that so we can move forward with creating a new logo for ourselves.
I don't suppose you can share that logo on the screen, can you?
Let me see if I can real quick. Hang on one moment. Let me put myself on hold for 1 second. And well, there's Taylor doing it the old-fashioned way, but let me see if I can't get an actual copy on screen. Give me 1 second if I could.
Thank you for that, Taylor. I was able to see it well enough.
One second.
Do you want a motion to accept that particular logo, or a motion to have the staff continue to work on logos? I wasn't quite sure.
Sorry, it'll be a motion to accept the logo as it currently is presented. I think this is a great option, but give me 1 second and see if I can't post it on the actual screen for everyone. My apologies.
I guess just in seeing the one Taylor was showing us, I'm curious what that check mark in the K represents. I just do a lot of branding, so I'm just curious.
I guess it represents that you voted. You checked off and voted. Just a wild guess on my part.
It's similar to the check mark V on the I voted stickers, I think, is the intent.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious.
Do you like it, Mr. Secretary?
I do. I think it's sharp.
Very good.
I agree.
Anybody else? I assume you all were able to see it fine. And anybody else have any comments about the logo? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Member Brangers? I see
like
you
it.
nodding. Okay,
Yep,
you like
I
it.
like it.
Okay, very good.
It's very sharp.
Anybody else?
To take it to the next level, if appropriate, I'll move the approval.
All right. Member Johnson moves the approval. Jared's taking too long, so we'll just go right on past him if I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Second by Member Brangers. All in favor of approving the new logo, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, we have a new logo. Jared, we beat you to it.
I apologize for that, and I should have had it ready on my screen, so I was having some technical difficulty getting it up. My apologies. We will post that officially, especially now that the board has done it. The Member Whitehouse, to answer your question, that is the check that we use in what the secretary said as a check mark for voting, an I voted sticker. And I thought it was a really creative use of the K and not creating something that was so kind of out there in a way that I think this will age very well. I think It'll also work very well across multiple platforms, whether that's on our websites, whether it's on letterhead, and then ultimately in our new location, we'll have some signage made to hang on the wall for this as well. So I appreciate the boards. Apologize again for not having it up on the screen, but we will have that publicly for view. And I know Taylor put it up on the screen as well. So thank you, Taylor, to that.
All right, very good. Any other business? Anybody have any other business they need to bring before the board today? Hearing none, we will need to move into executive session to discuss a security matter that's pursuant to KRS 61.810 paren 1 paren M. So if we can, I would accept a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
A motion by member Lewis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by member Brangers. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And
All
I think it was Lynn Lane that she beat me to it.
Oh, okay.
Deanna, you can have it if you want to.
Well, I will leave it to Sheila to decide who got the second. In any event, we will move into executive session now. And when we finish with executive session, we will come back into open session. We have nothing else on our agenda with the exception of confirming our next meeting. So let's get into executive session now.
If everyone will hold for a minute, I'll have Alan take us off live. And if you just hold, I'll come back and let everyone know when we are off camera.